Okay, well, only one place to start, lads. US men's national team in World Cup qualifying. 3 underwhelming performances, 1 good result, 5 points from the games against El Salvador, Canada, and Honduras. My question to you, Nick Mendola, is Gregg Berhalter under pressure after the start to World Cup qualifying, or do you think that's a little bit early for that?
I think you're sports cliche incoming. You're always under pressure in World Cup qualifying. I actually think the answer is both yes and no, and it's not a bit of hedging. I think internally he's not. Internally he's fine. He got five points there. He has 2 trophies this summer against their biggest rivals, and coming out of an absolute cluster of the Klinsmann / arena era. That said, there was a period in the first half where I briefly did again, I was figuring out, is this anger I have irrational or rational? And in my head, one of the things is is Dave Sarakin available for a month? And that was alarming. I think I'm happy with the 5 points. And frankly, the fact that they came back to win after what I consider to be a monumental collection of errors from the coach, which we haven't seen in a while, to start that game in Honduras, is this. Andy asked a question a few weeks ago. We're talking about the Premier League in Tottenham and Nuno Espirito Santo taking over at Tottenham. And his question was, does your team have an adult in the room? And within a few hours of that game, even, because I couldn't sleep afterwards, my thought was, I felt like this guy had a long-term plan and a system and wasn't going to be a reactive guy. Mm-hmm. And last night was either reactive guy with the 4 players who hadn't started to qualify or playing, or it was a guy kind of, sticking with a plan that defied all the things he had talked about, which was you need to have experience in CONCACAF. They had to win. They had to win, and this was, in my opinion, the hardest game of the 3, and he rolled out there with a group that looked like he was trying to be a mad scientist.
Yeah, he did a pep. He did a pep.
That's right.
He overthought it. He tried to create something that they've not done more than a couple of times during his time as national team head coach, and he tried to do it in World Cup qualifying, on the road, in Honduras, in a game that they effectively had to win. It's not the time to do that, Greg. And I understand that you've got these ideas, but the point that Nick, you just made right there, I think was perfect, was he's been working on building something specific the entire time he's had the job. It's always been a long project. It's not even really been about the 2022 World Cup. It's been a little bit longer term, getting this generation ready for the 2026 World Cup when we host it, when they're in the primes of their careers, when we actually maybe have a legitimate chance, if a lot of things go well, to go to the semifinals of a World Cup. And he just ran away from all of it last night for 45 minutes. And thankfully, he had enough humility or just common sense to completely scrap it at halftime, make 3 subs, own up to it, clearly accept the responsibility for that, and fixed it in the second half, and they go on and score 4 goals. So there are signs, there are little pieces and signs, I think, that keep me hopeful like that, and that's one of them, that the coach is still learning through this process as well, just as all these young players are. We talk about the young players, and they don't have the experience. Neither does the coach at this level, and so he's still learning just a little bit. And so I'm going to choose to give just a little bit of grace for this first window. I want to see a little bit better when we get to November, or when we get to October and November, but I'm going to give a little bit of grace on what we saw in September.
Nick, for you, what was your main takeaway? Because obviously Ricardo Pepi on his debut was excellent in that big win against Honduras. Matt Turner, is he now the starting goalkeeper ahead of Zach Steffen, who missed out through contracting COVID-19? I mean, there's a lot of takeaways here that we probably didn't expect when we spoke last time. I just want to say, you guys, before this international break, asked you how many points you thought and wanted the US to get. You both said 7, so you got 5. I think obviously a bit underwhelming, but I did get hammered a bit in the comments for saying this felt very similar to the 2018 qualifying cycle, a bit of overconfidence. The team coming off the back of the Gold Cup success, Nations League success. I just feel like any of that overconfidence now has actually been knocked out of this young US team, and maybe in the long run, in the other 11 games coming up, it was probably a good thing to get those poor performances out of the way early. As long as Andy said, we see more in October and November. But Nick, what was your overall takeaway when you think about this international break for the US men's national team?
Yeah, I'm positive that I'm going to possibly poorly apply a logic method here, but if you've ever heard the phrase Occam's razor, I boil it down way too simple, as to say that when given conflicting options, the simplest one is the right one. And they were without guys. They were without guys, and their emotional leader made a monumental error, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you would have said at any point in the United States men's national team history, prior to 5 years ago, by the way, the team's going to have starters at Juve and a guy who is a backup at Man City, and a guy who plays all the time at Borussia Dortmund, and someone who was on the French champs and played meaningful minutes for them as a super sub all the time. They're all not going to be there. You would have thought, oh my God. But this is a golden generation for the United States of America, potentially, I should say. And that's really what I take away from the most part. If Weston McKennie gets his act together, which, again, we'll talk about in a little bit, and Christian Pulisic is healthy, and even two of those names come back in the fold. We didn't even mention Sergiño Dest's injury. Then I feel like most of this window was about a bunch of guys being unavailable to the team. El Salvador really is the result that ultimately, if you just look at the way things worked out, that bothers me. I think Canada's better than most people think. And the USA had the XG advantage in both of those first two games, I think by more than a goal in both. So, yeah, listen, I almost feel as good about 5 points as I would have if they had 6 and we were talking about a game they lost. And does that sound insane?
That sounds about right. I'm sure Andy's got something to say on this because, yeah, I can already see. But aside from a 15-minute spell or 30-minute spell against Honduras, fans and pundits alike are being quite negative about these displays and these performances. Like you said, you're willing to give Berhalter more time. But what do we think it is? Is it the coaching situation, him getting the experience, the players getting the experience, maybe a mixture of both, the tactics maybe not working quite as well? What was your overriding sense of perhaps the issues that we saw against El Salvador, Canada, and for large chunks against Honduras?
Yeah, just to be clear, saying that I'm willing to be a little bit more patient doesn't mean that I wasn't disappointed with what we saw in the first 2.5 games during this window. It simply was not good enough, and if that's the way they play for 14 games, they will not qualify for the World Cup again, and we'll be having this conversation about 6 months from now of,
please no.
What do we do for the 2026 World Cup? Well, we qualify because we host it, so what's the plan? So I think my main takeaway from these, I have two actually, and then they're pretty specific things. One, Tyler Adams, for all the times that we have talked about, he's the most important or irreplaceable or whatever adjective you want to use to describe this incredible defensive midfielder. He was all of those things in these 3 games. The fact that he played all 3 games, the fact that he started all 3 games. I think that he played all 270 minutes in the 3 games as well because he was needed. I think the plan was probably to play the first and second game, especially for a player who's often injured. But when the situation became what it was after 2 games, we've got to start the most important player for the 3rd game, and he turned in another really rock-solid performance and was just everything we've been waiting for him to be healthy to be for the U.S. men's national team. And the other one is, it's a bit of an answer, it's a bit of a question, it's a bit of an answer to an old question, and then we ask the same question again. Miles Robinson is a starter at center back. Who's going to start alongside Miles Robinson now? Because John Brooks looked absolutely done. He looked awful in all 3 games. His size and just the lack of mobility was so apparent and obvious, and it hurt the U.S. so many times. The ball watching didn't help either, but his lack of mobility was a bit startling, and I don't remember him being that immobile, that slow along the back line. He couldn't stay with anyone. So Miles Robinson was fantastic. He was at the Gold Cup, and he took that right into World Cup qualifying. So we have one center back still, and we still need another.
Do you think that Ricardo Pepi can be the clinical forward that the US has been missing for a while? Nick, I mean, Josh Sargent has had up and down moments in the US shirt. There's a few other players who have been tried up there. Obviously, Daryl DK, PFOC has been good in spells, but what's your opinion on him? What did you see from him that you liked? Or maybe he's still very young, of course, second youngest player in World Cup qualifying history for the US after Pulisic to score. So he's got a lot of improving to do, but he showed when it counted and the US needed him, he stood tall.
I'm torn. Obviously, he's in the fold. Like he's in camp. For every single one moving forward. But I'm torn because Andy and I were texting during one of the games, and it was imagine if Jordan Morris was healthy or Giassi Zardes, and maybe players that we don't celebrate too much, but that just have that knack. And I went and looked up the numbers, and Zardes doesn't. I don't think he has an away goal in qualifying or in CONCACAF. But at the same time, these are guys who know where to be and know what to be. And Josh Sargent has now for 3 years been a part of systems where his job at club play at very high levels is to just run around like a maniac and press the heck out of the other team. It isn't about finding spaces and getting to the right spots of the field. And I just think there really isn't a replacement for being the man somewhere. The good news is Ricardo Pepi's kind of both right now. 11 goals for FC Dallas, 4 goals, I think, in his last 2 games. He's in form. And once Berhalter surrounded him with more experience, he looked like a different player. You might have not seen him in the first half. In fact, the best moment from a forward was a Josh Sargent knockback header from the end line. So I'm not ready to anoint him. No one should be ready to anoint him, but you should be very, very, very excited that an 18-year-old in that stage at halftime, by the way, where he could have been bewildered after watching a triple sub and think, well, when am I coming out? Well, when am I coming out? Nope. He just went to work, and very exciting, very exciting.
I'm pretty sure the Ricardo Pepi hype train left the station a long time ago anyway, but let's try and manage expectations, but what a moment for him. And going forward, he looks like he's going to be starting in October and maybe in November, these games coming up. So let's look ahead to those games. Got 5 points from the first 3 games. Coming up, I would argue, is going to be tougher. Jamaica at home, Panama away, and then Costa Rica at home in the next 3 games of the US coming up in October. Andy, given the fact that there's 5 points on the board and those 3 games coming up, where do you feel like the US is at? Are we still pretty confident they're going to qualify automatically in one of the top 3 spots in CONCACAF?
I think so, yes. I think it's going to be a matter of how much of a dogfight it is down to the end, and a lot of that is going to be down to availability for these next couple of windows before we get to the end of 2021, because not only do we have Zach Steffen with the positive COVID test and Pulisic coming off of his COVID test, but Reyna injured, Timothy Weah injured, Serginho Dest injured, Reggie Cannon unavailable this one. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances and not kind of important or key players, really important and key players that were either not in the camp altogether, that were in the camp to begin with, weren't there by the end, or just were unavailable through their own mental errors during this camp. So this had to be the most eventful international window for the U.S. men's national team since the day that they didn't qualify for the World Cup. There was so many things happening. It felt like a soap opera on the daily, that every day something new and something really dramatic and impactful and hurtful to this team was going to come down. There was going to be some kind of news every day. So if they can get everybody back available, maybe not everybody for the October window, but at least by November when they have to play Mexico, then I think they'll be fine. But they even with backups, even with the rotation and everything, I think we still need to see a little bit more cohesion, because we've dived deep into this player pool this summer and the last couple of years, really, and brought a lot of players into the fold, had a look at them, given them a taste of Berhalter's ideas and the things that he wants, the way that he wants to play. And I know it's a bigger stage for some of these players, but this is why they want to be there. These are the games that they want to be there for. And so if somebody has to step up and into one of those spots in October and or November, then we need to find who can do that. We need to find who's ready to do that. It's just about to bring back the golf analogies here, guys, since we did a lot of that last week. We need to be able to be ready to play ready golf. Whoever is up, whoever is standing over the ball and ready to hit it has to be ready to go. And we have to have that mentality, I think, for the next couple of windows, and then we will be fine. Yes, we will go to the World Cup. We will qualify. It's just got to look a little bit better to give confidence that once they get there, they're going to make some noise as well.
Nick, do you think the US is still in a pretty good spot to qualify considering this international window?
I do. I think they will qualify. It's just a matter of, for me, my standards are so much higher for them now. My expectation is even in a group of death that there could be a way out of the group stage for them again, and in more impressive fashion than the last time they did it. Like, that's where I want to be with this team because of the caliber of talent and the fact that they still have a year to grow for club and country. So could that change? Absolutely. And I don't think we're in a Ravel Morrison situation, but if Weston McKennie really does have an issue following rules, that's a very, very good player. If Yunus Musa, who may be the likely guy to have a better spot if healthy and in form, doesn't grow to the next level, is there an answer there? Because I think Keelan Acosta is fine, but I don't think he's a guy who gets you out of the group stage. So that's kind of my thing right now. My expectations are treating this team not like a CONCACAF team, but like a team that would be expected to reach any knockout round of any tournament they're in. And the way they played the last week, they won't.
That's true. I think we have to now obviously move to the big topic around the US men's national team. Andy alluded to it there. The breaking news throughout this camp was Weston McKennie's situation. He was sent home back to Juventus and to Italy after breaking team protocols and COVID protocols. Reports say a number of times, not just once. So obviously that wasn't tolerated by Gregg Berhalter. He was asked to leave the camp. He has done. He's since apologized. Pulisic and Berhalter said they had to put it to one side. Berhalter has left the door open a little bit for him to return in the future if his play on the pitch suggests so. But Andy, how disappointed are US fans, the team, and just everyone connected with the national team? Because Weston McKennie, for so many people, was seen as the next captain, the leader, the kind of guy that embodied the spirit around the group. I mean, this is a big deal, and unfortunately, this isn't the first time it's happened to him. It happened at Juventus, where he was fined and suspended for breaking COVID protocols and other quarantine rules in Italy before. So it's disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is disappointing. I'm more disappointed in the situation, I guess, than I am in Weston himself. When you consider the stage of what we're at, that this is World Cup qualifying, that this is the biggest stage that he himself has been on to this point in his career, you would think that would really take priority over absolutely anything else. When he flies back over to the U.S. and he gets into camp, that he would be laser focused and locked in on that. And clearly that wasn't the case for him during this window. And so I think there's probably some questions that he needs to ask himself about, what are the most important things that I've got going on here in my life at this point? Because it was a distraction. It was a huge issue for this team, spanning a couple of games here at the end. And I know they got the result against Honduras, but you can't look at that game, or you can't look at the Canada game and say, well, Weston McKennie on the field makes them better. They get a better result on that game. I think it's pretty obvious to look at. So at the end of the day, you have to remember, this is a 23-year-old. We were 23 once and probably doing some, not the smartest stuff in the world. We just did it without the eyes of an entire country and multiple countries around the world looking at us and kind of critiquing every little thing that we did. So hopefully it's a learning moment from Weston McKennie. It would appear that no one was injured or hurt or anything truly negative came out of this situation, because the first thing that comes to mind is somebody else breaking some curfew in U.S. men's national team camp, Charlie Davies, getting in a very serious and terrifying car accident and nearly losing his life. And so nothing to that degree happened during this. So everything, all is well that ends well at the end of the day, but it doesn't end well until Weston McKennie gets back in the good graces of Gregg Berhalter, gets back on the field, and turns in a few really good performances, and then we can just move on from this.
Nick, what do you think happens with his future? Is there a future for him? It seems quite clear there is, but there's got to be kind of some period almost where he isn't involved with the national team, right?
I don't know. We need the story. And that's the thing. Berhalter did not understand why people wanted details, and you wanted to grab the screen and you wanted to say, "Listen, man, we are judging you, and we're judging your group, and we're trying to feel like, what road are we on?" And if there were goofy stories going around in either direction, but the tamest one was, he got in trouble for taking his mask off when getting off the bus because that video was going around. And if it was something trivial like that going into a must-win game in Honduras, I would have said this coach is out of his mind. So once it became, oh, he's going to miss 2 games now, people's attentions were peaked, and you want responsibility, and you want to know how to feel about him, because frankly, if it's anything more than a 4 out of 10 in terms of severity, then I understand him not being around. If it's anything less than that, I expect him back in November, maybe not starting, but with the camp and paying his dues.
Absolutely. And obviously there was a lot of problems, as we said before, for Gregg Berhalter to juggle with injuries. Sergino Dest, Gio Reyna going down. Of course, Zach Steffen testing positive for COVID, even though he was double vaccinated. So he released a statement about that. And he seems to be doing well, but was back with Manchester City in England after that. So there was a lot to deal with aside from the Weston McKennie situation. And speaking of injuries, Christian Pulisic getting injured in the second half against Honduras. Not a good situation for Chelsea, for Christian, and of course for the US men's national team. Andy, he wore the captain's armband on the last 2 games, really seemed to step up as a leader after returning from just recovering from COVID-19 and a positive test that he had with Chelsea and working his way back to full fitness. So, I mean, what do you make of this situation? Because Gregg Berhalter said they will not know the severity of his ankle problem until he gets back to London with Chelsea. So hopefully, touch wood, this isn't another situation which sees Christian Pulisic on the sidelines for a few months, right? Because that's awful timing. Whenever he's injured, it's awful timing. But with October and November World Cup qualifying around the corner, the US really needs him now.
He's already second choice at Chelsea. We needed him to come out of this camp healthy with a couple good performances, take that momentum back, push back into first team selection for Thomas Tuchel, and be playing regularly between now and the October window. That's pretty clearly not going to happen now. Now it's a question of, will he even be healthy to be called in for the October window? We can cross our fingers, we can hope, but we've been down this path with Pulisic before. Now, at least it's not a muscle injury, which he's had a ton of, and it seems like at least it's been a while since he's had any injuries with that, with the soft tissue injuries, and so this one just being kind of a contact thing, you can't really avoid that. So fingers crossed he gets healthy, because like you say, Joe, he did look good, especially in moments where somebody needed to step up. It was always him, dropping deep, give me the ball, I'm carrying past 2-3 defenders, I'm going to try and make something happen. He had a little bit of that Clint Dempsey mentality to him this window.
He did, and one more thing to keep an eye on for the next upcoming windows. As of right now, Panama is on the red list in the UK, so Pulisic, Steffen, Josh Sargent, maybe a few others, Anthony Robinson included, they may not be able to play in that game at Panama if the current restrictions from the UK government. We've already seen FIFA getting involved and the scenes in South America over the international break with Argentina and Brazil. So there seems to be, there's a lot of moving pieces. I'm sure there'll be something figured out between now and then, but that's another thing just to complicate matters even further. Obviously, Weston McKennie, that situation was not good. Pulisic getting injured is not good. But overall, the US men's national team are unbeaten through the first 3 games of World Cup qualifying. 5 points on the board. Not bad, not ideal, but just okay. I think we can sum it up that way. So head over to Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com for the latest US men's national team news and World Cup qualifying news from all over the globe. And remember, Telemundo Deportes and NBC Universal are showing a lot of these games. You can stream them online on telemundodeportes.com as well. So we've got you covered when it comes to videos, streams, and everything else you need to know ahead of World Cup qualifying restarting in October. And we really are entering the crunch time now for nations all around the world.